Hello, I'm Dean Bertram. Welcome to my cabin in the North Woods. In this innocuous, well-worn little ring case, I've got something to show you tonight. I think you'll find it more than a little bit curious. Indeed, some people suggest it's physical evidence for the existence of the fair folk. That's right, of the fairies. But the sun's starting to go down here in the North Woods, and it can get mighty dark mighty quick in this part of the world at this time of the year. So I'm going to take it inside and show you there. In the meantime, I suggest you might want to get yourself a beverage, relax and get comfortable, because I've got quite the fairy tale to share with you. Welcome back. It's actually a really appropriate time for us to have this chat and for me to show you what I'm going to show you in that little ring box and tell you the tale I'm about to tell you. Because we passed the fall equinox here quite some time ago. The days are noticeably getting shorter and the nights are noticeably getting longer. I've harvested almost everything from my garden. I think there's some potatoes left out there, that's about it. The first frost has come, many frosts have come. And before too long, it's going to be Halloween. Indeed, even the little streets in the smallest town near me are already lighting up with Halloween decorations. So are the couple of stores that are in that small town. And in that small town, like many small towns and suburbs and cities across this great land, it won't be long until those streets will ring with the laughter and shouting of children going door to door, gobbling candy. And that's what we think about when we think about Halloween, right? Trick-or-treating, partying, horror movie marathons. But that's not what we always thought about when we thought about that time of year. My ancestors from Scotland and Ireland, they had a very different idea about what Halloween meant. On All Hallows Eve on Samhain, they'd gather around their small fires, carve grotesque faces into turnips, the precursor to the lopsided, grinning, happy jack-o'-lantern. Their turnips weren't so friendly. In fact, they were created to do something very different than entertain. They were designed to keep away the things that prowled the moors and the glens and the valleys and the villages on All Hallows Eve. Things that would look in the window and maybe take the unprepared. So those turnips were carved to keep away those things. And now we think about maybe it was demons or devils or the spirits of the dead, and sometimes it was. But in those Gaelic-speaking countries, it was more often than not the Sídhe, the fair folk, the fairies. Because you didn't want them to come and take you away. And it's ironic the names we have for them. Those names still, they resonate with the sense of familiarity and the idea that somehow we were close and we liked these beings, fair folk, gentry, or the other crowd, which is kind of innocuous. But they were anything but innocuous. You didn't want to say anything bad about them because they had the power to destroy you. And especially on Halloween, but all of the year round, really. The word that we have today, stroke, when somebody has a brain incident or hemorrhage, which often can end their life, certainly if they have a number of them. That initial term comes from the idea that you were stroked by the fairies. The fairies stroked you. Which leads me to what I have to show you in this small box that I have right here. I have to insert a close-up because these things are tiny. It's elf-shot Fairy arrowheads. I have a number of them here. Or so that's what they were meant to be. I inherited this box from my father. He gave it to me before he passed away, quite some time before he passed away actually. Handed down from generations, at least the contents. I don't know if they're real or whether they're real. They're tiny, arrowhead-like pieces of stone. Perhaps created by the she. Or perhaps found by some dreaming child in some stream long ago, or by some prankster in a gravel pit. Who knows? But people would keep these because they would serve as a talisman, a protective barrier from additional attacks by them. It was both a noun and an adjective, elf shot. This is elf shot, but you could also be elf shot by elf shot. And if you were, you might have a stroke. You might pass away mysteriously. Or they might attack your animals instead if you wronged them. If you wronged the she. If you wronged the other crowd. If you wronged the good neighbours. And your cow might become ill and die, or it might just stop producing milk. Or your horse might become lame. Of course, sometimes they'd take us away as well. You wouldn't want to go to sleep in a fairy ring, or even perhaps step in a fairy ring. A circle of mushrooms where the good folk had danced the night before. You certainly didn't want to encounter them when they were dancing, or when they were prowling the night on a wild hunt, perhaps looking for a fairy lover who had escaped fairyland. Then you would really lock your doors, Halloween or not. And of course, many people have made the comparison that the old fairy lore of missing time and being taken away by diminutive beings bears a striking correlation to alien abduction. And in many ways it does. But most abductees return after a short spell of missing time, perhaps, or when they were sleeping at night. But in many fairy traditions, people didn't return. They disappeared forever. Perhaps a fairy took a liking to them, wanted to make them their lover, or perhaps they'd offended the fairies. Or for whatever reason they were gone for good. Or sometimes they would return years later, many years later. And when I today read tales of the paranormal and the supernatural, sure, again you can see those correlates with alien abduction. But what I really think about are the type of missing people reports in the works of authors like David Paulides, where people just poof, disappear off the map. Sometimes their bodies are found, or their remains are found, in the same place where skilled rescue teams had scoured previously. Often on paths they'd walked several times, the body returns. Sometimes the body never returns. And so perhaps the fair folk are still with us today. Perhaps they still take us. So as Halloween comes, be particularly careful. When you carve that jack-o'-lantern, maybe think about what it really means. And if you're lucky enough to acquire some elf shot, I'd keep it close. Now, my father, very sadly and very perhaps ironically given this conversation, actually died after having multiple strokes. And this is meant to protect you from such things. But then again, he had given it to me years before the strokes took him. You can't help but wonder if he'd held on to the elf shot, whether the strokes would have passed him by. Anyway, thank you for listening. And Until next time, happy Halloween.